I'm going to focus on Afghanistan, and actually we'll start pretty far in the past because Afghans start pretty far in the past. There's probably no country in the world that maybe has a lower rate of literacy but a higher feeling for its history than in Afghanistan. And this first came up in the 1970s when I was with nomads and we were discussing various military conquerors, and we got to Genghis Khan and they all started to curse because they hated Genghis Khan. They said he ruined the country. And after this diatribe against him, one of the nomads turned to me and he says, we used to have 5 major irrigation canals in this province, now we only got 3. You should have come to Afghanistan before Genghis Khan. It was a really nice place, okay? Well, Genghis Khan destroyed that province in 1220, and they were still pissed off about it. Okay, what I want to focus on, in some ways, will be a little contrary to talk you've heard before, is questions about understanding Afghanistan, because I believe there's as much myth to reality in terms of understanding Afghans, some of which is pushed by foreigners, but a lot of which is adopted by Afghans. One is Afghanistan is unconquerable. 2001, New York Times said, nobody ever conquered Afghanistan, not Genghis Khan, not Alexander the Great. Well, wait a minute. First of all, until the British arrived in the late 1830s, Afghanistan had been conquered by everybody. It was known as the Highway of Conquest. So you can see here, it was part of the Persian Empire. Herodotus lists some of the major Persian provinces as Kandahar, Herat, Balkh. Alexander the Great, he went in. People said, oh, he went up the Kunar Valley and people threw rocks on his head and he had to run away. Yeah, because he made a wrong turn. He was heading towards India. He made a left turn, found himself in the Kunar Valley, realized he was in the wrong place, burned the villages, and went down the Khyber Pass, conquers India. All right? However, he won the strategic battle because today the Nuristanis claim they're descendants of Alexander the Great. But the bigger thing was the Greeks ruled Afghanistan for another 2 centuries, the famous Greco-Bactrian kingdoms. So they must have done something. Similarly, Mahmud of Ghazni, who's a Turk, not an Afghan, uses Afghanistan as a base, Ghazni as a base, and invades India many, many times. Makes a very powerful empire based in Afghanistan. Genghis Khan, regardless of what people say, he did conquer Afghanistan and everything else. He went home. He wasn't interested in it. His grandchildren came back, but he left. But he did conquer it. He defeated everybody. And Timur, a guy we know as Tamerlane, started out in Samarkand, conquered Afghanistan, went all the way over to Damascus, and his heirs moved the capital of the Timurid Empire from Samarkand to Herat. One of the high points of Afghan culture and history is the Timurid period in the 14th and 15th century in Herat. Why don't we hear about that? Because they weren't Pashtuns. They were Persian speakers in Herat, but this is where the great Persian literature tradition, the Persian artistic tradition was all put together. Indeed, when Afghanistan had a coup in 1973 and declared a republic, the New York Times wrote a snotty editorial that says, Afghanistan leaps into the 16th century. And my friend, who was a good Pashtun, turned to me and says, I don't know, the 15th century was pretty good around here. I think we may have acted in haste, jumping in. But if we come up to where Afghanistan comes in the modern history, in the 16th to 18th centuries, what we find, it is divided into 3 parts. Kandahar and Herat are ruled by Safavid Iran. It's Sunni Muslim Afghanistan, but they're ruled by a Persian Shia dynasty. There's no religious problem here. Mughal India controls Kabul and Peshawar, fights over Kandahar, but eventually gives it up. And the Turks, the Uzbeks, control northern Afghanistan. The modern state of Afghanistan that we see today comes into existence after this period, but it's important to realize that the state of Afghanistan itself comes and goes in history, but its regions have been there forever. Kandahar, Herat, Balkh, Kabul, Bagram, and down to Peshawar, the phantom limb of Afghanistan that got cut off and they still feel it. You think the Pakistanis want Kashmir back? The Afghans want Peshawar back. Okay, you know, we want to get down to plebiscites here. Pakistan better be careful about what plebiscite it asks, because as far as Afghanistan is concerned, they figure they own half of Pakistan already. In terms of looking at this, the interesting thing about all of these empires and stuff that you're seeing, they're all ruled by foreign conquerors. None of these people are Pashtuns. None of these people are indigenous to Afghanistan. They all come from the outside. So the interesting thing is when we look at Afghan history, this is why it begins in 1747 with the foundation of the Durrani Empire, the first Pashtun Empire. Pashtuns would say, we are the natural rulers of Afghanistan. We have ruled Afghanistan for 250, 260 years. True enough. What happened about the 2,000 years before? Well, we didn't rule. So when we're looking at modern Afghanistan, and particularly the belief that Pashtuns have a natural right to rule, this is a relatively modern phenomenon. But it's important to realize that Afghanistan has dealt with a lot of different people, a lot of different ethnic groups, different religious sects, and they've all managed to put it together. But the most interesting thing about the foundation of Ahmad Shah Durrani and his empire is this is a dynasty that will last from 1747 until 1978 when Dawood is thrown out of power and killed by the communists. That's 230 years. Second myth about Afghanistan. It's ungovernable. Well, if it's ungovernable, how do you get a dynasty that lasts 230 years? You have fighting within the dynasty, you have civil wars, but it always comes back together. Also, the basic state of Afghanistan that we see today comes out of this period. People say, well, Afghanistan, it's an artificial state. Its borders are artificial. What borders are not artificial? I'm from Massachusetts, I live next to New Hampshire. I mean, why should New Hampshire exist? It does, all right? Its borders are artificial. How comes that little squiggle down by West Virginia that Pennsylvania lost? You know, like, what about that thing about Erie? All borders are artificial, all right? Get used to it. The question is, what's the thing behind it? And Afghanistan has a pedigree, even on its current borders, going back to the mid-1800s.